You saw the thumbnail. 9 bottles crossed out, 5 circled in green. And you're standing there in the auto parts aisle, holding a can that promises to save your engine, wondering if it's about to quietly ruin it instead. Here's what doesn't add up. Cars in Japan routinely pass 300,000 kilometers with the original fuel injectors still spraying clean. Yet the mechanics who keep those engines alive refuse to pour in most of the cleaners sitting on your shelf right now. They live on an island that recycles everything, that fixes instead of replaces, and they still say no to the very product marketed as the fix. I couldn't let that go. So I started pulling the thread, and it led me to a garage in Nagoya, a Japanese fuel law passed in 2005, and one word on a label that changes everything. Stay with me, because the last piece of this is something you can do in your own driveway this weekend with a car built anywhere in the world. Let me tell you where this started for me. I was in a small repair shop off a side street in Nagoya, watching an old mechanic, leather hands, 60-odd years old, work on a Toyota with over 280,000 kilometers on it. I asked him, through my friend translating, which injector cleaner he trusted. He didn't answer right away. He walked to a shelf, picked up a bottle, turned it around, and pointed at the ingredients. Then he shook his head and put it back. He never told me the brand. He told me to read the back, always the back, never the front. That one gesture sent me down a rabbit hole that took months to climb out of. Because here's the thing I learned first, and it made me angry once I understood it. Most of what you're being sold as fuel injector cleaner is not really cleaning your injectors at all. Let me show you the trick. Flip almost any cheap bottle around, and you'll find it's mostly solvent, naphtha. Mineral spirits, sometimes xylene or toluene. These are strong-smelling petroleum distillates, and yes, they'll dissolve some surface gunk. But here's what the front of the bottle screams and the back of the bottle hides. A pure solvent doesn't cling to the hot metal of an injector tip long enough to do deep work. It flashes off. It burns with the fuel. It gives you a faint whiff of improvement for one tank, and then the deposits come right back, because you never removed the real problem. You just rinsed it. I found mechanic after mechanic in Japan describing the same suspicion. On forums where Japanese home mechanics trade notes, the pattern repeated. The cheap stuff is a fragrance, not a treatment. One man wrote that pouring in a solvent-only cleaner was like spraying air freshener in a dirty room and calling it clean. That line stuck with me. And it gets worse, because some of these solvent-heavy cleaners can actually cause harm in a modern engine. Older cars had thick, forgiving fuel systems. Your newer vehicle, and every Japanese car built in the last 20 years, runs tighter tolerances, delicate seals, and often direct injection at very high pressure. Flood that with an aggressive solvent, and you risk swelling a rubber seal or knocking a big chunk of loosened carbon into a spot it shouldn't go. The mechanic in Nagoya wasn't being fussy. He was protecting an engine he intended to keep running for another decade. So the first clue clicked into place for me. The reason Japanese mechanics reject most of these bottles isn't superstition, it's that most of them are solvent theater. But that only deepened the mystery. Because if the cheap ones are nearly useless, then what exactly is in the handful that actually work? What's the one ingredient that separates a real cleaner from a scented rinse? That question is where the real evidence starts. There is one word you're looking for on that back label, and once you know it, you can never unsee it. Polyetheramine. On some bottles it's written as PEA, or listed as polyetheramine. Let me explain what it does, because this is the part nobody puts on the front of the can. Polyetheramine isn't a solvent. It's a detergent molecule with two ends that behave completely differently. One end grabs onto the carbon deposit. The other end grabs onto the fuel. So instead of just splashing past your injectors and evaporating, this molecule latches onto the baked-on gunk, pries it loose in tiny pieces, and carries it out through combustion in a slow, controlled way. It works with the heat of the engine instead of fighting it. It doesn't flood and swell. It scrubs at a molecular level, then leaves quietly. Here's the history that makes this real, and it surprised me. This wasn't discovered in some ancient tradition, it was engineered. Chevron's research team developed the Chevron additive built around polyetheramine chemistry, and it hit the market in the mid-1990s. Before that, the industry had been fighting deposits with cruder detergents that couldn't handle the higher temperatures of the newer injector tips. Polyetheramine could take the heat. It stayed stable where the older chemistry broke down. That's why it became the gold standard the serious cleaners are still built around today. Now here's why this connects straight back to Japan. Japanese automakers were among the first to obsess over injector cleanliness at scale, because their whole reputation was built on engines that simply do not die. When a Japanese engineer designs a fuel system to survive 300,000 kilometers, they cannot rely on the driver dumping mystery solvent in the tank. They need chemistry that's predictable, gentle, and effective. Polyetheramine fit that philosophy, perfectly controlled, patient, thorough, the opposite of a harsh flush. So when that old mechanic pointed at the back of the bottle, this is what he was checking for, not the price. Not the flashy claims about horsepower or the word extreme in red letters. He was scanning the ingredients for real detergent chemistry and rejecting everything that was just distillate in a fancy can. And here's the number that stopped me cold. A proper polyetheramine treatment, used correctly, can restore an injector's spray pattern and flow to near original over a few tanks. Independent testing on deposit-fouled injectors has shown restored flow into the high 90s as a percentage of original capacity. A solvent-only rinse? Marginal at best, temporary at worst. Same shelf? Same price range? Sometimes? Wildly different results. And nobody's telling you which is which. That's when one piece clicked and a much bigger door swung open. Because now I had to ask the question that had been nagging me the whole time. If the good chemistry has existed since the 1990s, and it's not even expensive, why is the shelf still 90% junk? Who benefits from you grabbing the wrong bottle over and over again? That's where the trail turned dark. Follow the money, and the picture gets ugly fast. A bottle of polyetheramine cleaner costs real money to make because the additive itself is genuinely expensive to produce. A bottle of naphtha and mineral spirits with a splash of fragrance costs almost nothing. So which one do you think earns more margin on a shelf? Sold to a driver who's scared his engine is clogging and just wants to grab something that says cleaner in big letters. The dirty secret of this aisle is that most brands aren't selling you a cleaner. They're selling you the feeling of doing something. And they've learned that a strong chemical smell and a satisfying glug into the tank convinces you it's working, whether or not a single deposit ever moved. The word detergent on the front means almost nothing. Legally, a company can call almost any additive a detergent. But the word polyetheramine on the back is chemistry you can verify. Guess which one they put in big print? And which one they bury or leave out entirely. I dug through comment sections on car repair videos, and the frustration was everywhere. Man after man saying the same thing. I've poured this stuff in for 20 years and never knew half of it did nothing. One fellow wrote that he'd spent hundreds of dollars over a decade on a brand he trusted, only to learn it was one of the solvent-heavy ones. Hundreds of dollars to rinse and reclog. That's the cost of not knowing. That's the quiet tax on people who trusted the front of the label. And it's not just wasted money, it's the eventual repair bill. A neglected, deposit-choked injector runs rich or lean, drops your fuel economy, roughens your idle, and in a modern direct injection engine, a failed injector can run you hundreds to well over $1,000 to replace. So the person who grabbed the wrong bottle for years didn't just waste $20 at a time. They may have set themselves up for the exact failure the product promised to prevent. Now let me name the pattern in the 9 you should walk past. I'm not here to trash a specific label. I'm here to hand you the rule the Nagoya mechanic handed me. Walk away from anything that lists only petroleum distillates, naphtha, or mineral spirits as its guts. Walk away from octane boosters pretending to be cleaners. Raising octane does not scrub an injector. Walk away from the water-removing products. the ones that are basically isopropyl alcohol, when what you actually need is deposit control. Those have their place in winter, but they are not injector cleaners. Walk away from the dollar bin no-name bottles with no ingredient list you can verify. And be very careful with the harshest extreme flush solvents in a newer engine with delicate seals. 9 variations of the same trick solvent theater, priced to move. That's the whole game right there, and once you see it, the shelf never looks the same again. If you want to go deeper into everything I found on this, the chemistry, the Japanese engineering philosophy, the driving habits, and the full system behind engines that simply refuse to die, I put it all together in a book called Japanese Roots, and there's a companion volume called Deep Japanese for those who want the complete picture. Everything in this investigation expanded and structured so you can apply it to any car you'll ever own. The full framework lives in the full system, which ties it all into one discipline. You'll find all 3 mentioned in the description below. They're the rabbit hole, fully mapped. But knowing the chemistry is only the first layer, now let's talk about who's been keeping it from you and why. But knowing what to avoid still left me standing in the middle of the mystery, because I could feel some of you thinking exactly what I thought. This is fine for a mechanic in Japan with a lift and 40 years of instinct. What about the rest of us, in an ordinary driveway, with an ordinary car, no special tools, and no plane ticket to Nagoya? That's the part I want to hand you right now. And I built this next stretch for exactly that person. Here's the good news that took me far too long to learn. You do not need a shop. You do not need to be Japanese. You do not need anything but the right bottle and a little patience. And you can do this in your own driveway this weekend. The method the good mechanics use is almost embarrassingly simple once you strip away the mystery. First, you buy a cleaner built on polyetheramine. Read the back. Confirm the chemistry. The ones that consistently pass this test are Chevron Techron Concentrate Plus, Redline SI1 Complete Fuel System Cleaner, BG44K, Royal Purple Max Clean, and Gumout Regain High Mileage. Those 5 are the circled green bottles. They're built around real detergent chemistry, not distillate in a costume. I'm not paid by any of them. I'm telling you what the ingredient lists and the independent flow tests actually show. Second, you time it right, and this is the step almost everyone gets wrong. You do not pour a full bottle into a full tank. You want a strong, correct concentration of the cleaner meeting the deposits, not a weak, watered-down splash. So you pour the treatment in when your tank is low, around a quarter full, and then you fill up. That way, the cleaner mixes at the right strength as the fresh fuel comes in, and it rides through your whole system at a concentration that can actually do work. Third, and this is the part that turns a rinse into a real clean you drive the car properly afterward, not idling in the driveway, not creeping around the block. You take it out and you run it under real load on a longer drive, letting the engine get fully hot and work through that treated fuel. The heat plus the detergent is the combination. One without the other is half a job. Fourth, you don't do it every week, like the marketing implies. For most cars in decent shape, running a proper polyetheramine treatment every 5,000 to 10,000 kilometers, or roughly every few months, is plenty. If your car is older, higher mileage, and never had this done, you might run 2 or 3 treatments a little closer together to catch up on years of buildup and then settle into the gentle rhythm. That's it. That's the whole method. No shop, no lift, no mystery. Let me put the cost in front of you plainly, because this is where the whole racket falls apart. A single bottle of the real thing runs you somewhere around $10 to $20. Used a few times a year, you're spending maybe $40 to $60 a year to keep your injectors genuinely clean. Compare that to a single failed injector replacement that can climb past $1,000, or the slow bleed of 10 to 15% worse fuel economy from clogged injectors that you pay for at every single fill-up without even noticing. The math isn't close. The right $40 a year quietly protects thousands. So there it is, the practical case, handed to you, usable this weekend, in whatever you drive. And if I stopped here, you'd already have more than most people ever learn about that aisle. But I promised you a Nagoya garage and a Japanese law from 2005, and this is where the whole case finally snaps shut. Because there was still one thing that didn't fit, and it's the biggest clue of all. Here's the paradox that had been sitting under everything. If the good cleaner is so important, why do so many Japanese mechanics use it so rarely? I kept expecting to find them treating every tank. Instead, I found the opposite. Many of them barely touch injector cleaner at all, and their engines still cross 300,000 kilometers clean. That made no sense to me until I found the two things the West never copied. The first is buried in a law. In 2005, Japan moved its entire national gasoline supply to what's called sulfur-free fuel, bringing sulfur content down to just 10 parts per million, years ahead of most of the world. Now here's why that matters, and why nobody told you. Sulfur and dirty fuel are a major source of the very deposits that clog your injectors in the first place. Cleaner fuel going in means far less gunk building up. The Japanese didn't just get better at scrubbing, they attacked the problem at the source, at the pump, for the entire country by law. Their engines stay cleaner because the fuel itself is cleaner. And in much of the West, unless you deliberately buy the higher standard fuel, you're pouring in gasoline that builds deposits faster and then paying for cleaner to remove them. You've been sold the disease and the cure. That alone reframed everything. But it's the second thing, the one from that Nagoya garage, that's the real finale, and it costs you nothing. When I finally got that old mechanic to explain his philosophy, through my friend, he said something I've never forgotten. He said Japanese mechanics don't try to scrub a clean engine, they try to never let it get dirty, prevention, not rescue, and the single most important habit in that philosophy has nothing to do with any bottle, it's how you drive. He explained that the number one cause of injector and carbon buildup he saw was short, gentle, cold driving. The car that only ever creeps to the market and back, engine never fully hot, never worked hard, never given a chance to burn its deposits off. That car clogs. The remedy Japanese mechanics quietly rely on is the deliberate hard run, taking the car out on a longer drive once a week or so, getting it fully up to temperature, and running it through its rev range under real load in a safe, legal way. The heat and the airflow burn off the light carbon before it ever bakes into a hard deposit. Old mechanics in Europe called a version of this the Italian tune-up, but the Japanese made it a discipline. Burn it clean, don't scrub it clean. Think about what that means. The most protected engines on Earth aren't protected mainly by an expensive product. They're protected by clean fuel at the pump and a driver who lets the machine run the way it was built to run. The bottle of polyetheramine is the backup, the tool you use to catch up on old buildup or to help along a car that's stuck in short, cold trips. But the real secret, the one the marketing will never sell you because there's no profit in it, is that a good fuel and a good hard drive prevent most of the problem for free. So here's your case, fully closed. Buy the higher standard, cleaner fuel when you can. It fights deposits at the source, the way an entire nation chose to in 2005. Take your car out once a week and let it get fully hot on a real drive and burn the light carbon off before it bakes on. And a few times a year, run one real polyetheramine treatment, one of those 5 green circled bottles poured into a low tank, followed by a good long drive, to clean up anything the burning missed. That's the whole system the mechanic in Nagoya was protecting. Not a miracle in a can, a quiet discipline that keeps an engine alive for decades. And the 9 you cross out? Every solvent-only rinse, every octane booster in disguise, every no-name bottle you can't verify, every harsh flush that risks your seals, you walk right past them now, because you can read the back of the label the way that old man taught me to. Here's what I keep coming back to. Somebody figured out how to keep engines running for 300,000 kilometers, and instead of that knowledge reaching you, it got buried under a wall of shiny bottles designed to make you feel safe while your money and your engine slowly drained away. You just took it back. That's who you are, if you made it this far. You're not the person who grabs the loudest bottle on the shelf because the front promises the most. You're the person who turns it over, reads the truth on the back, and refuses to be sold the easy answer. That instinct is exactly what the Nagoya mechanic had, and now you have it too. So tell me one thing in the comments. And be specific. Go look at whatever fuel additive is sitting in your garage right now, flip it over, and tell me, does it say polyetheramine on the back, or is it just solvent in a costume? I read these, and I want to know how many of you have been pouring in the real thing versus the theater. Leave it below, plainly. I'm curious what's actually on your shelves. And if you want to keep pulling these threads with me, recovering the practical knowledge the convenience world quietly buried, one investigation at a time, come with me on the next one. Because I found something about the way Japanese drivers treat their car batteries in cold weather that stretches their life nearly double what we get in the West, and it's a 5-minute habit almost nobody outside Japan has ever heard of. That's the next case. I'll see you there. I'm glad you're still here. This video gave you the overview, but inside my circle, the Japanese ways circle, I pick up right where we just stopped and walk you through the full detox. Ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You'd belong among thousands of curious learners just like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen, and you can cancel anytime.